Welcome. Tonight, you're about to step quietly into the past. Imagine a morning that never saw the sun. While the world above still slept beneath the weight of stars, hundreds of men and boys stirred in silence. In tiny cottages, they pulled on thick boots with heavy saws, tied scarves around their necks, and stepped out into the cold morning air. Ahead of them stood the pithead, tall, skeletal, and unmoving against the mist. It was time to go below. There was no rush, only rhythm, the slow, familiar routine of lives bound to the earth. In this story, we follow just one of them, a coal miner somewhere in 1840s England. Through his eyes, we'll see the slow descent into shadow, the quiet work that fed the fires of the Industrial Revolution, and the small human moments that flickered like lantern light deep underground. So, find a comfortable place. Let your mind grow still. Before we begin, I'd love for you to comment below where you're rewatching from, and what time it is, where you are right now. Now, let's take that first step toward the mine, and leave the daylight behind. It is still dark outside. Not the peaceful, starry kind of darkness, but the dense, smothering blackness that presses up against old, soot-covered window panes. The village sleeps restlessly under a heavy sky. Cold seeps through the walls of every cottage. A single street lamp flickers at the far end of the alley, barely illuminating the crooked outlines of chimneys stacked against the sky. And then it starts. The first sound is not loud, but it is unmistakable, a dull metallic clanging that rings out in the silence. The wake-up bell. It is 4 o'clock a.m. in a coal mining town in 1840s Britain. The bell tolls from the center of the village, attached to a long pole planted beside the colliery office. Its echo slips down the alleyways, over damp stone roads, and into the rooms where sleeping men, boys, and even younger children stir awake in silence. There is no alarm clock, no snooze button, just the bell and the knowledge that if you miss it, or worse, ignore it, you may lose your day's wage or your job, or gain the attention of the overman who does not take kindly to weakness. No one wants that. Inside one of the miners' cottages, a family is already on the move. The father, Thomas, is the first to sit up in the narrow bed he shares with two of his sons. His back aches, as it always does. He rolls his shoulders quietly, then reaches down to shake the boy sleeping at his feet. "Up now," he murmurs. The boy stirs 12 years old, maybe 13. Small for his age, but already hardened by years of crawling in the dark. This is Samuel, his eldest. He does not complain. He swings his legs over the side of the bed and begins to dress, moving by touch alone. Their home has no gaslight, only a few wax candles saved for Sundays. The second son, Harry, is only 8. He sleeps in a small cradle bed beside the fire, which has long since gone cold. Thomas moves to waken too. "On your feet, lad." Harry's eyes blink open. They are red-rimmed from coal dust and lack of sleep. He says nothing. He is used to this. In the corner of the room, their mother wraps a shawl around her shoulders and places a kettle on the stove, trying to coax heat into the room with the last lumps of coal. It won't be enough for tea. Today, just hot water. Still, it's something to warm the bones. They don't talk much. No one does at this hour. Words are too heavy before a shift. The family eats a bit of cold bread saved from last night's supper. No jam, no butter. Just coarse bread that sticks to the throat unless you sip water between bites. Then, boots are pulled on still damp from yesterday, and cloth caps are snugged down over tangled hair. The boys each grab a small tin lamp filled with oil and a stub of cloth wick. It will be their only light for hours. By 4:30 a.m., the streets begin to fill. From every creaking door and leaning gate, figures emerge, mostly men, but also a surprising number of children. Some carry picks or lunch tins. Others simply carry themselves, bundled in rough coats with thin scarves knotted around their necks. You can hear the coughing now, low and persistent. The kind of cough that never really goes away. The colliery looms at the edge of town like a sleeping beast, its tall chimney stacks silent against the sky. The winding tower stands above the pit mouth, black ropes strung like giant threads into the dark unknown below. A few lights glow in the engine house, where the night shift is finishing up. Soon, the hoist will start again. There is a line forming at the shaft entrance. The men and boys shuffle forward slowly, yawning or rubbing their eyes, some mumbling prayers under their breath. No one pushes. There is an unspoken rhythm to this descent ritual, practiced daily. At the front of the line stands the overman, lantern in hand. He doesn't smile. He checks each name against the logbook, noting who has arrived, who is late, and who is missing. Thomas nods a greeting. Morning. The overman grunts. Get in. Cage is nearly ready. The cage, a metal platform attached to thick iron ropes, sits at the top of the shaft, ready to lower its cargo into the depths. It rocks slightly, suspended in place by the winding gear. 10 men step inside, then 5 boys. No one speaks once inside. They hold tight to the rails, some closing their eyes. With a jolt, the cage begins to descend. The wind rushes up around them as they drop into the earth. The sounds of the town disappear, replaced by the creak of pulleys, the hiss of damp air, and the occasional groan of the shaft walls shifting. It's a long way down, over 1,000 feet for some of the deeper pits. The air grows colder and wetter as they go. Lamps flicker. Water drips steadily from wooden beams that line the shaft like ribs of a long-dead creature. The walls feel close here, even though they can't be seen. At last, the cage grinds to a halt. The men step off into darkness. Oil lamps are lit with practiced ease. Pools of yellow glow form brief halos, just enough to see a few feet ahead. Then the real work begins. Boys like Samuel and Harry separate from their father now. They'll be crawling into narrower tunnels, guiding coal carts or clearing debris. It's dangerous, dirty, and exhausting, but it's their job. The colliery calls them trappers, hurriers, or putters, depending on what task they're assigned. Titles don't change much. The work is all the same, backbreaking and endless. Thomas heads for his assigned wall face, where he will spend the next 10 hours swinging a pickaxe by lamplight, carving coal from the rock inch by inch. His fingers are already numb. His shirt is already wet with mine water, and he hasn't even begun. Around him, the mine breathes. It creaks, it drips, it groans. Voices echo faintly through the tunnel's distant shouts, curses, instructions passed like whispers through stone. Sometimes the mine seems to speak back. It is never silent and never still. As dawn breaks far above, the world below continues without pause. There is no sunrise down here, only flickering lamps, damp stone, and the constant scrape of metal against earth. This is the coal miner's morning, a descent into darkness, both literal and unseen, and it is only just beginning. The cottage door creaks open with a reluctant groan. Cold air spills in from outside, brushing against faces still marked by sleep. A mother watches from the shadows of the doorway, arms folded tightly against her chest, shawl drawn close. Each footfall soft by coal dust and lingering dampness from the evening fog. His breath leaves little clouds behind him, disappearing into the gray. In one hand, he carries a dented tin lamp, and in the other, his lunch pail, a metal tin with yesterday's bread wrapped in cloth. He doesn't speak either. Words are too heavy before the descent. Rows of homes give way to open ground, the earth turning rough beneath their boots. A thin stream runs alongside the path now, choked with soot and bits of black stone. It snakes toward the edge of the colliery, where the land begins to warp. flat fields giving rise to mounds of slag and earth, heaped high like unnatural hills. The cobbled lane is quiet, wrapped in that stillness that belongs only to the earliest hours of the morning, a silence before the world stirs. Gears grinding slowly into motion, chains rattling. Somewhere behind the pithead, a whistle shrieks, long, sharp, and final. It signals that shift will begin soon. Anyone not in the cage before then may lose their place. The pace quickens. The hoist operator climbs into his cabin, coughing as he goes. Everyone has a place, and every place has its rhythm. A group of men already stand nearby, their faces lit by flickering lamps. Every day, this part makes his heart beat faster. He's tall, dressed in a black coat with a lantern strapped to his belt. His face is narrow, his voice gruff. The waiting, the stillness, the way the cage groans underfoot when it settles. A few speak in low voices. One laughs, a short, sharp sound that doesn't spread far. Most are unlit. Some homes stand crooked from years of neglect, wood warped and paint flaking. His father stands behind him, one hand resting on his shoulder for balance. The cage shudders slightly as the last man boards. Then, a short whistle, a click, and the descent begins. Walls lined with soaked beams slide past on either side. Water trickles from cracks. The temperature drops. One of the lamps flickers and goes out. No one says a word. The miners live close together, shoulder to shoulder in cottages with leaking roofs and sagging beams. The next level is deeper, an older tunnel where support beams groan under the weight of years. Somewhere down here, air pockets shift and sigh. The mine breathes. Wooden beams crisscross upward toward the hoisting gear at the top, where iron ropes hang like sinews of a great machine. The path to the coal face is long, winding through low tunnels where the roof grazes their backs, and the air grows warm with trapped breath and body heat. The real work, the noise, the dust, the danger, all of it still lies ahead. Beneath it, the shaft disappears into the earth, yawning wide like the mouth of something ancient. An old man leans against the stone post, lantern hanging from a hook above his head. He doesn't ask names. He knows them all. He simply marks the time with a piece of chalk on a slate board nailed to the gate. If you're late, it's there for all to see. If you're missing, it stays circled until someone comes looking. Or doesn't. Smoke drifts from nearby chimneys. From the engine house, the boiler room, the blacksmith's shed. Lights glow in a few high windows. The air is thicker here, heavy with the scent of coal, grease, and metal. His boots crunch on broken stone. A rat scurries across his path. He doesn't flinch. He's seen worse. Every creak of rope, every drop of water, every distant echo of metal on stone stretches the seconds. The boy grips the rail tightly. His lamp casts a trembling light, revealing nothing and everything all at once. But out here, in the quiet before the shift, there's a kind of eerie beauty, a peace that exists only because of the stillness. Above them, chimneys stand like sentinels, their narrow forms stretching upward into the mist. A curl of smoke drifts here and there, but most hearths are cold, and most windows remain dark. She doesn't speak. She only nods once, a farewell without words. She's done this before, too many times to count. And so they begin the walk. Boots strike the hard-packed gravel of the street with slow rhythm. The boy walks just behind his father, a smaller figure bundled in a threadbare coat. As they move through the village, lanterns burn dimly in a few doorways, casting long shadows that stretch across the path like reaching arms. They pass other families walking the same road. Figures emerge from fog-draped alleys. Boys with caps pulled low. Men with tired eyes. Everyone walks with the same steady pace, boots striking stone in unison. They nod to one another in silence, a gesture more out of habit than greeting. They're not strangers. They are brothers in work, in exhaustion, in coal dust. The further they walk, the more the village falls away behind them. And then it comes into view, the pithead. It rises like a black skeleton against the barely breaking dawn. A low hum fills the air, the sound of machinery waking up. Now they're passing the colliery gates. Beyond the gates, the yard is alive. A handful of men load empty carts with tools. The blacksmith stokes his forge. The boy follows his father around a heap of coal dust, ducking past the loading shed. Ahead, the cage waits. It's lowered now, the iron platform resting just above the shaft, slick with condensation. The boy catches his breath. The overman approaches, record book in hand. Move along, you're in the first descent. No one argues. The boy steps onto the platform, careful not to slip. The hoist jerks once, then lowers. Chains clatter. The floor trembles beneath their boots. As the cage sinks into the shaft, daylight fades almost immediately. Deeper and deeper they go. The shaft swallows them whole. They pass the level where the last group finished their shift. The cage slows for a moment, then continues. The descent takes minutes, but it feels longer. Then, at last, the platform stops. A thud, a whistle. The gate swings open. They step into blackness. But this is only the beginning. But for now, the hardest part is over. The walk through silence, through sleep, through shadow. The path to the pithead is behind them, and the underworld is waiting. They gathered near the mouth of the shaft, men of varying ages, their faces pale in the early morning light, but hardened by repetition. Some sipped the last of their tea from tin mugs. Others stood in silence, hands stuffed into coarse jacket pockets, waiting for the bell to signal the start of the descent. The sound of boots on stone and whispered conversation echoed lightly against the walls of the colliery. This was the moment before the plunge before sunlight gave way to shadow and warmth surrendered to the chill of the underground. The cage was nothing more than an iron lift. Open at the sides, its floor scratched and darkened with years of use. It groaned and clanked as it rose to the surface, pulled by cables that stretched endlessly into the sky. As it stopped, the shift captain barked the usual call. The men stepped forward, packing into the lift shoulder to shoulder, the space tight, their breath visible in the cold morning air. For the new boys, this would be the first time. For the old-timers, it was the 1000th. Yet the feeling was never quite the same. Each descent into the mine was a journey into something different, something alive and unknowable. With a mechanical jolt, the cage began its downward journey. The light faded rapidly, and the thin circle of sky above shrank into a pinhole. The iron frame creaked and vibrated under the strain, the wind created by the descent pulling at sleeves and scarves. The walls of the shaft slid past wet, rough-hewn stone interspersed with timber supports and the occasional glimmer of mineral vein. Water trickled down in cold threads, catching on clothing, slicking the walls with dampness. For those inside, the temperature dropped steadily. The deeper they went, the more the warmth of the surface was stripped away, replaced by a penetrating, heavy chill. It was a cold that settled in the bones, quiet and old. No one spoke during the descent. There was something sacred about this moment, a shared silence, not of reverence, but of routine. Words felt out of place, as if voices would echo too long in the shaft, disturbing the unseen. Some closed their eyes. Others stared into the black, waiting for their boots to feel solid ground again. The deeper they went, the more the pressure in their ears built. With a practiced motion, they swallowed or yawned to adjust to the growing force, used to the strange sensation of being slowly buried in the earth's breathless quiet. Then, with a final shudder, the cage came to rest. The gates were unlatched, and the men stepped into the darkness, not pitch black, but a twilight world of muted lanterns, low ceilings, and walls that closed in like stone lungs. It took a moment for their eyes to adjust. The oil lamps, fixed to their caps or carried in hand, cast thin cones of yellow light that barely reached the edges of the passageways. Shadows danced across rough beams and soot-covered walls. The smell was immediate, an unmistakable damp rock, iron dust, coal, and something faintly metallic, like old blood or rusted tools. It was a smell that lingered in clothes long after a shift ended, that followed them home and clung to bedding, boots, and skin. It was the smell of the mind's breath, warm and strange, and always slightly damp. The air was still close. Ventilation systems provided circulation, but even the breeze underground had a different quality. It moved sluggishly, like a slow tide in a heavy sea, never quite fresh, always tinged with the scent of sweat, rock, and the past. Breathing here was heavier, more deliberate. The lungs learned to adapt. Boots crunched on coal dust as the men began to walk, each step echoing faintly ahead. The tunnels stretched in all directions, some wide and timber-braced, others narrow, requiring the miners to duck or crawl. Water collected in small pools on the uneven ground, and the light from their lamps shimmered on the surface as they passed. The occasional rat darted into cracks in the wall, a silent reminder of life below. The farther they walked from the cage, the more the isolation settled in. The sounds of the surface, the birds, the wind, the morning chatter were all long gone. Down here, noise took on a different character. The clang of pickaxes, the rumble of carts, the dull thud of distant explosions, all of it softened by layers of stone. Even speech was different. Men spoke in low tones, not out of fear, but practicality. The walls absorbed volume, and shouting only wasted breath. Some areas were newly dug, the timber still fresh, pale and fragrant in contrast to the soot. Others were ancient, their beams blackened and bowed, the walls slick with history. The mine was a living memory, its tunnels carved by generations, each shift expanding the labyrinth. For the youngest boys, those starting their first day, the descent into this world was a shock. No amount of preparation or description could match the experience of feeling the earth close around you. Their small hands clutched lunch pails, their faces pale and wide-eyed as they tried to keep pace with the older men. The air was thicker down here, the silence more complete. Yet even fear grew familiar in time. There was a rhythm to the underground, a kind of pulse in the mine struck the timbers creaked soft. Water dripped steadily from seams in the rock, and every now and then, a faint gust of wind passed through like a sigh. The miners learned to read these signs. A change in the timbre of a creek, a sudden stillness, a smell of gas where there was none before. These were warnings, understood not through instruction, but instinct and repetition. They reached the work face one of many that day. Here, the real labor would begin. But before the first pick struck coal, before the carts rumbled forward or the powder was set for blasting, there was always a moment of stillness. Not prayer exactly, though some did cross themselves, but an inward breath, a quiet acknowledgement of where they were, deep beneath the ground, far from light, far from sound, inside the belly of the earth, with only each other and the thin halo of oil lamp glow. This was their world now, for the next 10, 12, even 14 hours. This narrow corridor of rock and soot and breath. The descent was over, but the true weight of the day was just beginning. The descent in the mines was only the beginning. Once the cage rattled to a halt at the bottom of the shaft, the darkness was immediate and absolute. The only way to push back the thick curtain of black was through a small, flickering flame. It may seem inconsequential, now a single flame in a vast subterranean void, but to a coal miner, that flame meant survival. It was their vision, their clock, their canary in the coal mine. Lighting the lamp was not just a routine act. It was a ritual, weighted with years of tradition. Its flame told them when it was safe to move, when to rest, and on some occasions, when to flee. If a lamp suddenly burned brighter, it could be a sign of increased oxygen levels, or worse, a sudden release of dangerous gas. A child would sit with a lamp at a cross-section, watching and waiting, listening for footsteps or signals. They were called trappers, as they were often assigned to open and close ventilation doors that controlled airflow in the mine. They spent hours in near total isolation, with only the warm flicker of a flame to keep them company. The sound of a blast traveled through the earth like thunder underwater. After a day's shift, miners would emerge from the earth, faces blackened, eyes blinking against the daylight. Their lamps would be extinguished one by one, the tiny flames snuffed out until tomorrow. The ritual ended, only to begin again at dawn. Rescue crews would rush in, their own lamps flickering wildly, praying they wouldn't ignite more gas. Sometimes all they found were shattered lamps, lying beside charred walls, and the remnants of those who once carried them. If the flame danced erratically or burned blue, it meant methane. A lamp that wouldn't light after several tries was seen as a bad omen. In that simple light was the entire world of a miner, the hope of another day, the dread of sudden death, the companionship of fire in a world that otherwise had none. It gave shape to the dark, warmth to the cold, and meaning to the endless hours spent beneath the earth. When we think of the industrial age, of steel and soot and revolution, we must also think of that fragile flame dancing against the black and always on the edge of vanishing. Some miners believed that spirits lingered in the mines, jealous of the living, and would interfere with lamps to send a warning. These beliefs weren't dismissed easily. They were part of the psychological armor that miners wore, a way of rationalizing the unpredictable nature of their world. That small detail, that change in color, might be the only warning a miner had. There were countless stories of men noticing a change in the flame and throwing down their tools, sprinting back through the tunnels, shouting for others to follow. Sometimes they made it, sometimes they didn't. Older miners had a habit of staring into the lamp's flame during breaks, as though reading a private message in the flickering light. It was calming in a place where silence and blackness were overwhelming, and the unspoken knowledge that this lamp could mean the difference between life and death. Most miners used safety lamps by the 1840s, particularly the Davy lamp. Invented by Humphrey Davy in 1815, these were designed to enclose the flame in a wire mesh that would prevent it from igniting. Flammable gases like methane a constant threat in the mines. Yet, even this technological innovation came with risks. If the flame flickered too much or extinguished suddenly, it wasn't just an inconvenience. They were kept clean, polished, and functional, passed down from father to son. A miner's lamp was not just a tool. It was an extension of his life. Shadows leapt and curled along the jagged rock walls. Their boots sank into coal dust and water. The smell of sulfur and damp stone clung to everything. The deeper they walked, the more they became part of the darkness, their bodies half-illuminated specters beneath the earth. It meant that gas was near, and the miners had only moments to act before an explosion might rip through the tunnels. Lighting the lamp took on a quiet solemnity. It was often done in a designated area at the surface, or in special lamp rooms underground. There, the lamps would be filled with oil or alcohol, their wicks trimmed and tested. An experienced fireman, usually a senior miner or someone trained in safety procedures, would inspect each lamp to ensure its integrity. A cracked glass, a bent wire, a weak seal, any of these could mean disaster. Once checked and approved, the lamps were distributed, and the men headed into the dark. As the miners walked to their assigned locations, each lamp cast just enough light to illuminate the ground ahead. There was no natural light to mark the passage of time. The lamp became their sun, but lamps could also betray them. Children, too, had lamps, smaller, lighter versions. They were often tasked with carrying them for older workers, or placing them along tunnels to provide guidance. In some mines, superstition surrounded the lighting of lamps. The lamps themselves became personal artifacts. Miners often customized them with scratches, initials, or decorative touches. There were also tragic stories. Times when a faulty lamp or a misjudged flame caused an explosion that cost dozens of lives. Even in safety, the lamp cast its long shadow. There is something poetic about the lamp. Beneath the surface of the earth, in a world where sunlight never penetrates, the underground mine is a realm ruled by shadows and silence. Or so it might seem at first. Yet, if you listen carefully, you'll discover a vast and intricate soundscape that fills these hidden spaces. The soft, distant tapping of picks against stone is the first voice you hear, that relentless percussion that marks the heartbeat of underground labor. It is a place where every noise carries meaning, every echo tells a story, and the silence itself feels alive. The deep, muffled world below the earth hums quietly with life. The sound fills the air, layering over itself as dozens of miners work their way through the labyrinth of tunnels. The rhythm shifts and changes as the workers advance, pause or rest, creating an organic, ever-changing percussion orchestra. They remind us that beneath the earth's crushing weight, people come together in solidarity, relying on each other for safety and companionship. In this underground world, where isolation could so easily overwhelm, those soft conversations become lifelines, proof that humanity persists even in the harshest conditions. It is a steady reminder that, despite the overwhelming darkness, human hands are busy, shaping and extracting life from the depths. Heavy wagons laden with coal or rubble rattle steadily along narrow metal tracks laid deep within the mine. Their movement is uneven and jarring, a harsh mechanical cadence contrasting with the organic rhythms of human labor. The carts rumble forward with a determined persistence, their wheels grinding and squealing around bends, their jolts shaking loose dust and small stones from the tunnel walls. The sound is unmistakable, a rhythmic clink-clank. Clink-clank as iron wheels roll over iron rails. It is an ambient backdrop that miners learn to live with, part of the mine's constant soundtrack. The water's presence can be a blessing or a curse. It cools and moistens the air, but it also makes the ground slippery and dangerous, adding another element to the miner's daily hazards. Then, with a creak and a jolt, the clatter resumes again steady, relentless like the pulse of the mine's underground machinery. From somewhere far below or beyond the tunnels comes a low, rolling vibration, like a distant growl from the bowels of the earth. This rumble can be so faint that it is almost imperceptible, a subtle vibration felt more than heard. In the echoes and murmurs, we hear more than just noise. We hear resilience. We hear history. We hear the very heartbeat of the earth. The sound vibrates through the bones, a reminder of the precariousness of life deep underground. In such moments, work may pause, lamps may flicker nervously. It is a living world, a place shaped by human hands, but also by nature's slow and powerful forces. Every tap, whisper, and drip is a thread in the fabric of this hidden place, a place where life clings to the edges of darkness. Men whisper urgent warnings. The earth is unpredictable, and its movements can be swift and deadly. Or it can suddenly rise, resonating through the tunnels and shaking dust from the ceilings. It is a haunting, beautiful, and sometimes terrifying chorus. It tells stories of human courage, labor, and fragility. Drops fall slowly from unseen cracks or stalactites high above, each one a tiny splash as it strikes puddles on the floor or the cold metal of the rails. The rock strata shift and settle in response to the mining, to natural forces underground, or sometimes to seismic activity far beneath the surface. These rumbles are warnings, omens of potential collapse or danger. The miners listen carefully for these sounds, their trained ears able to detect even the faintest tremor. The sound is soft, almost delicate, but its persistence is unyielding. The miners push and pull these wagons with strength born of necessity, their exertion another layer of sound in this subterranean orchestra. Each blow is deliberate, precise and active defiance against the unyielding stone that traps the coal beneath it. The sound is crisp and metallic, carrying farther than one might expect in this enclosed world, bouncing off the rough walls and ceiling. Sometimes the tapping is fast and urgent, a flurry of strikes as the miner chips away a stubborn seam. The water is a reminder of the mine's ever-present dampness, the slow seepage of moisture through the rock, a quiet, natural counterpoint to the human struggle below. Sometimes the drops fall into a pool, creating a ripple that briefly shimmers in the dim light. At other times, the water runs in tiny rivulets, whispering secrets as it flows along cracks in the stone. Other times, it slows to a steady, methodical beat, like a heartbeat steadying itself for the long haul. As you settle into the mine's depths, your ears become your guide, picking out the faintest sounds that reveal what the eyes cannot see. Tap, tap, tap. The sharp strike of steel on rock echoes through narrow tunnels and cavernous chambers, creating a rhythm as old as mining itself. This tapping is more than just noise. It is the miner's connection to the earth, the way he shapes the dark world around him. Between these steady strikes, faint voices drift through the stale, heavy air. The miners speak in hushed tones, low whispers, barely rising above the ambient noise, careful not to disturb the fragile atmosphere or risk igniting pockets of deadly gas. These murmurs might be warnings, instructions, or quick exchanges between comrades. Sometimes a word of caution, watch the loose rock, or a soft reply, I'm coming. At other times, a quiet joke or shared story slips through, a small light in the otherwise oppressive silence. These whispered voices carry a fragile warmth, a thread of human connection, woven through the cold stone corridors. Amid the tapping picks and hushed words, there is another ever-present sound, the clatter of carts on rails. These carts are the veins of the mine, transporting its precious cargo toward the surface. Sometimes the carts stop abruptly, and the sudden silence is filled only with the echo of boots shuffling or tools clinking. Between these more obvious noises lies a subtler one, the steady drip of water. Drip, drip, drip. These droplets echo faintly in the stone corridors, their irregular rhythm contrasting with the more structured tapping and clatter. This steady drip also marks time in its own way, a metronome for the long hours spent underground. Beneath these layered sounds lies an even deeper one, the occasional rumble of shifting earth. This is the mine's reminder that it is a living, breathing entity. When the rumble grows louder, anxiety fills the tunnels. All these sounds, the striking picks, whispered voices, rattling carts, dripping water, and rumbling earth together form a rich tapestry of sound, the underground's voice made audible. The sounds remind us that the mine is not just a dark hole in the ground. Listening to these underground sounds connects us to the miner's world, its dangers, its hardships, but also its quiet moments of solidarity and hope. Before the descent, before the first strike against stone or coal, before the flickering lamps illuminate the dark tunnels, there is a ritual that every miner knows well, the preparation of the tools. This is a quiet, deliberate moment of time when the day's work begins not with noise, but with care and respect for the instruments that will shape every hour underground. The tools themselves are simple in design, yet each one is vital. Pickaxes, shovels, hammers, and wedges. These are the miner's extensions, their hands made stronger and sharper. Every tool has been shaped for purpose, worn smooth in places by countless hands, and scarred with the marks of battles fought deep beneath the earth. The pickaxe is the most iconic of these tools. Its sturdy wooden handle, often worn smooth from years of use, fits snugly in a miner's grip. The metal head sharp on one side for piercing and broad on the other for levering, carries countless scratches and tiny chips, each telling its own story. Every dent marks a strike against stubborn rock or coal, a reminder of hours spent breaking through the earth's stubborn resistance. As miners gather before their shift, the preparation of the pickaxe is almost ceremonial. They test the handle for splinters or cracks, run their hands along its length, feeling for weak spots that might snap under pressure. The head is inspected closely. Is the metal still sharp? Has it been hammered back into shape after a previous bend or break? These tools endure punishment, and a well-maintained pickaxe can mean the difference between steady work and dangerous failure. Next comes the shovel, another indispensable tool. Its wide metal blade is designed for scooping loose rock and coal, and its long handle gives leverage to shift heavy loads. The shovel's blade may be chipped or scratched, dulled by contact with hard stone or metal, but it remains sturdy and ready. Like the pickaxe, the shovel's handle is smoothed by hands, sometimes calloused and rough, sometimes nimble and quick. Each miner's use shaping its form. Shovels are cleaned meticulously before every shift. Dust, mud, or coal residue is wiped away, preventing buildup that could slow the work or cause slips. Handles are polished, oiled if needed, protecting the wood from the damp mine air that could rot or weaken it. The shovel, though often overshadowed by the pickaxe, is just as crucial. It moves the broken earth, clearing paths and piles, and carries the fruits of labor closer to the carts that will haul it to the surface. Hammers and wedges are smaller, yet no less essential. The hammer's head is solid and heavy, perfect for driving wedges into cracks and seams. Wedges, often made of hardened steel, are inserted into fissures to split stubborn rock. These tools require precision and timing, their use reflecting skill honed over years underground. Before the shift, each hammer and wedge is examined. Handles are checked for splinters. Heads are tested for looseness. A loose hammer head could fly free with disastrous results. A wedge worn too thin might fail to split the rock at a critical moment. Beyond mere function, the tools carry stories. Scars and scratches tell of near misses, of rocks that struck back with unexpected force. Marks on handles reveal how each miner gripped their tools differently, some with strength, others with careful finesse. Names or initials might be carved into wood or metal, identifying ownership in a crowded workshop or underground. Some tools bear more than just physical marks. They carry memories. A pickaxe passed down from father to son. A shovel repaired countless times by a skilled craftsman. A hammer balanced perfectly in a miner's hand after years of use. These tools are not simply objects. They are companions in the long, difficult hours beneath the earth. The preparation of these tools is both practical and psychological. To hold a well-maintained pickaxe is to feel readiness, to know that you can meet the mine's resistance. To check the wedge and hammer is to claim control over the forces of nature, to carve order out of chaos. These moments of care give miners confidence, a ritual that steels their nerves before facing the darkness. In the dim light of lamp rooms or surface workshops, miners often exchange tips on tool care, how best to sharpen a pick, how to oil a handle without making it slippery, which wedges hold up best in different types of rock. There is a shared knowledge passed down through generations, a tradition of craftsmanship intertwined with the harsh realities of mining life. Some tools receive special attention. Pickaxe heads may be heated and hammered by blacksmiths to restore their edge. Handles might be replaced or reinforced with metal collars to extend their life. Sometimes, if a tool is damaged beyond repair, it is retired with respect, and a new one is chosen carefully to take its place. The tools also symbolize the miner's identity. Just as a sword was a knight's honor, the pickaxe is the miner's emblem. It represents skill, endurance, and the bond between man and earth. A miner's tools are often the only possessions he can truly call his own, in a world that demands so much and offers so little. And so, as the men prepare their tools each day, they are not simply getting ready for physical labor. They are engaging in a time-honored ritual that connects them to centuries of miners who came before, who faced the same dark tunnels, the same dangers, and the same demands. In those quiet moments before the descent, the tools rest in strong, weathered hands, ready to transform stone into passage, rock into coal, and darkness into light. Beneath the earth, where light rarely reaches and the world narrows to the width of a tunnel, miners work side by side, shoulder to shoulder, breath mingling in the stale air. Here, in the crushing silence broken only by the sounds of picks and shovels, something remarkable happens. Outside, a miner might be just another worker, a nameless figure lost among crowds. But underground, every face tells a story of friendship, of loss, of courage, and quiet resilience. It is in the quiet that trust grows, the knowledge that the man next to you has your back, understands your rhythm, and will act without hesitation if danger strikes. In this confined, dangerous space, men forge bonds unlike any other bonds, born of shared hardship, unspoken understanding, and a trust deeper than daylight ever knows. Words can be heavy and dangerous in such a confined space. But underground, those stories were tucked away, folded beneath layers of soot and sweat. Those who worked together often formed lifelong friendships, their bonds strengthened by the daily dance with danger. The knowledge that the man next to you might save your life, or that you might save his, created a powerful sense of loyalty and respect. Instead, what mattered was the here and now, the man beside you, the tunnel ahead, the steady rhythm of work. Accidents were common, and the loss of a fellow miner was a wound felt deeply by those who remained. Instead, communication happens through glances, gestures, the slightest nod, or shift in stance. They become comrades, allies bound by necessity and shared experience. If a roof showed signs of instability, if a lamp flickered suspiciously, if a sudden silence fell over the group, the men reacted instantly, guided by instinct honed over time. They celebrated births, mourned deaths, and supported each other through hardships. The mine created a unique social fabric, one woven from shared risks and shared rewards. They depend on each other for survival, for guidance, and for comfort. Instead, sorrow was carried quietly, shared in the small gestures of remembrance. A tool left on a bench, a cigarette offered in a rare moment of rest, a lamp dimmed in tribute. Each face carried the story of long hours, fierce struggle, and enduring spirit. They shared knowledge about the safest paths, the quirks of the tunnels, and the subtle signs of danger. They carried these bonds into their homes and communities, shaping families and futures. Their stories of friendship, grief, and trust passed down through generations, a legacy forged deep beneath the earth and carried into the light. Many miners' children would grow up hearing stories of the mine, not just of the work, but of the friendships that made it possible to endure. These mentors were pillars in the underground community, guiding others with steady hands and steady hearts. When one falters, the others are there to steady him. In the silence and shadow, miners found each other. They forged bonds that were tested by danger and grief, but strengthened by trust and shared hope. The faces in the shadows were not just workers lost to the dark. They were brothers, friends, and survivors. Their eyes often held a tired vigilance, a wary alertness shaped by years of working in perilous environments. Yet, within those eyes was also warmth, the spark of friendship, humor, and humanity that persisted even in the darkest places. Breaks were rare and brief, but when they came, the miners would gather in small clusters, lamps casting soft pools of light against the dark walls. The mine was a harsh teacher, but it also forged bonds of kindness and solidarity that transcended the darkness. In these fleeting moments, laughter might bubble up, stories shared, or simple comforts passed from hand to hand. A piece of bread, a sip of water, a warm cigarette. The men would gather briefly before their lamps were lit for the next day, heads bowed in respect. This trust was earned through countless hours of shared labor and danger, built on the certainty that no one would be left behind. Stories of the lost miner were told softly, honoring his memory with the same reverence given to the earth they toiled in. When fear creeps in, it is met by steady presence and silent support. It taught the men to watch over each other with fierce vigilance, to cherish each small victory of safety, and to hold fast to the camaraderie that made the impossible bearable. Their eyes become attuned to each other's presence, reading unspoken signals as clearly as if they were shouted commands. The mind is a place of shadows, not only in the physical sense, but in the way it conceals the faces, emotions, and stories of those who dwell within. The first thing you notice about the miners working together in the tunnels is their silence. They rarely speak unless necessary. This silence is not cold or lonely. It is a language of its own, a way of conserving energy and focus in an environment where distractions can be deadly. In these dim tunnels, men become more than co-workers. Friendship underground is forged differently than above ground. There are no idle chats over coffee or casual weekend meetups. Instead, friendships are born in moments of tension and vulnerability. A shared joke whispered in a brief pause, a helping hand pulled from the muck, a lamp adjusted without a word. These small acts become the threads weaving a tight fabric of connection. Many miners carried with them stories of loss and hardship from the surface families waiting, children growing up without them, dreams deferred. In this harsh world, companionship was survival, but not all bonds were forged in joy. The mine was also a place of grief. Grief underground was often silent and private. There was little room for public mourning in the cramped, dangerous space. Sometimes, when a miner did not return from his shift, the news would travel slowly, carried by whispers and heavy silences. This shared grief forged a bond deeper than words. It was a reminder of the stakes, the fragility of life beneath the surface. Trust in the mine transcended ordinary friendship. It was an unspoken pact, a mutual understanding that every action, every choice, could mean the difference between life and death. Miners learned to read each other's body language in near darkness, to anticipate a comrade's needs before a word was spoken. This trust extended beyond the working hours. Many miners formed close-knit communities above ground, families entwined by the bonds made deep below. Though light was scarce underground, the faces of miners were unmistakable, etched with grime, lined with fatigue, but also marked by determination and quiet dignity. Many miners bore scars, some from accidents, others from years of harsh conditions. It was common for miners to look out for the younger or less experienced among them, mentoring them in silent ways. Despite the toil and danger, miners found moments of solace together. These small gestures sustained morale and reminded the men that even in the depths of hardship, human connection endured. The friendships and trust formed underground did not end when the miners left the tunnels. The faces in the shadows, once hidden by soot and darkness, became the foundation of tight-knit communities above ground. In the end, the mine was more than just a place of labor, it was a crucible of human connection. And it is these stories, the quiet, unseen lives beneath the earth, that remind us of the true heart of the mine, the people who lived it, loved through it, and carried its weight together. Deep in the mine, beyond the main tunnels and rail tracks, lies the coalface, the very heart of the underground world. It is here that the raw work of extraction unfolds in its most dangerous and physically demanding form. The coalface is a place of contrasts, narrow, claustrophobic spaces and vast raw walls of black stone, choking dust and sharp, metallic sounds. The relentless rhythm of picks, hacking at ancient rock, broken only by heavy breaths and the occasional murmur of voices. To stand at the coalface is to confront the true essence of mining, the brutal labor and the ever-present threat that shadows every strike. The space at the coalface is often cramped and unforgiving. Miners must crawl, stoop, and squeeze into tunnels barely wider than their shoulders, the low ceilings forcing their bodies into awkward, strained positions. There is no room for ease here. Every movement requires effort. Every step is calculated to avoid injury or collapse. The walls close in, dark and damp, the rough surfaces slick with moisture and the black sheen of coal dust. This tightness is a constant pressure, a physical and mental strain that wears down even the most hardened workers. The air at the coalface is thick with dust-defying, choking powder that hangs suspended in the weak light of lamps. Every strike of a pick sends clouds swirling, blurring the edges of the narrow passage and settling quickly on skin, clothing, and tools. Breathing becomes a battle in itself. Miners often cover their mouths with cloths or handkerchiefs, trying to filter the worst of the dust, but it seeps into every corner of the lungs, leaving a harsh, gritty residue. This dust is an invisible enemy, insidious and persistent, a constant hazard alongside the more obvious dangers of falling rock and unstable ground. The sounds at the coalface are a harsh symphony. The steady hack-hack of picks striking stone dominates, a sharp metallic clash against the ancient rock. It is a rhythm both brutal and hypnotic, marking the passage of hours in relentless repetition. The strikes vary, sometimes quick and frantic when a seam is stubborn, other times slow and deliberate as miners carefully chip away layers of rock. Each blow demands strength, precision, and endurance, the body straining to deliver enough force without exhausting itself too soon. The pickaxes are joined by shovels scraping at loose coal, the dull scrape of blades moving debris into piles. Occasionally, the clink of wedges and hammers breaks through as miners work to split larger chunks of rock. Every tool moves with purpose, driven by muscle memory honed through years of experience. Amid this cacophony, the miners' breaths come hard and uneven, echoing softly against the stone walls. Sweat drips steadily, mixing with dust and grime to form a thin film over skin. Despite the stifling heat and suffocating air, the men press on, their bodies locked in a constant battle with fatigue and discomfort. The light at the coalface is harsh and limited. Flickering lamps cast sharp, dancing shadows on the rough surfaces, illuminating only small patches of the tunnel at a time. Beyond the circle of light lies an abyssal blackness, hiding unseen dangers and amplifying the sense of isolation. The shadows play tricks on the eyes, and every movement seems magnified and distorted in the flickering glow. The atmosphere is heavy with tension. Every moment brings a reminder of the risks. A crack in the wall, a sudden shift in the ceiling, the faint odor of gas. Miners remain alert, their senses heightened by the ever-present threat of collapse or explosion. Safety is never taken for granted. Vigilance is as much a part of their work as the physical labor itself. Despite the dangers, there is a rhythm to the work, a harsh poetry in the way men move in unison, their actions coordinated almost instinctively. Each strike, each shove, each careful placement of a wedge contributes to the progress of the day's work. They move as a unit, a team locked in a shared struggle against the earth. At times, exhaustion threatens to overwhelm. The narrow spaces restrict movement, the dust and heat sap energy, and the unending rhythm wears down resolve. But the miners push on, driven by necessity, pride, and the knowledge that their labor fuels distant factories, homes, and lives above ground. The coalface is not just a place of danger and toil. It is also a place of camaraderie and quiet determination. The men share fleeting words of encouragement, brief glances that speak volumes, and the occasional hand extended in support. In the crushing confines of the coalface, these small gestures carry immense weight, sustaining spirits and binding men together. Every day at the coalface is a test of endurance, skill, and courage. It is a confrontation with the raw, unforgiving earth, a place where the strength of body and mind is pushed to its limits. And yet, in that relentless struggle, there is a fierce dignity, a testament to human resilience and the enduring will to persevere. no matter the darkness. In the vast darkness of the mines, alongside hardened men, worked children, boys whose ages should have bound them to play and school, yet instead found them caught in a harsh, unforgiving world beneath the earth. These children, sometimes as young as 6 or 7, carried burdens far beyond their years. Outside, the rumble of carts and the clatter of tools echo faintly. Inside, the boy's eyes grow heavy, the cold seeps into his bones, and the loneliness presses in. In the dim light, dodging obstacles in slippery patches, the boys moved with surprising agility. They lived in a world where the lines between childhood and adulthood blurred, and where innocence was quickly lost. The coal dust that coated their clothes and skin marked them visibly as part of this underground world. Yet behind their soot-blackened faces were eyes that carried stories no child should bear. Their work was a vital link in the chain of extraction, keeping the flow of labor uninterrupted. The mines promised wages, even if meager, that could keep their families fed. Yet the price was high. Childhood was traded for long hours in cramped darkness, the constant threat of accidents, and the slow erosion of health. Over time, many grew into the roles of full miners, their childhoods absorbed into the endless demands of the coalface. Respiratory diseases, stunted growth, and exhaustion were common companions to these young workers. He listens intently for the footsteps of passing miners, ready to open the door just long enough for them to pass, then quietly close it again. They learn to support each other, to warn of dangers, and to navigate the underground world with care and caution. Their laughter, when it came, was rare but precious, a brief spark of light in the oppressive gloom. Their stories, often untold, speak of resilience and survival, but also of a harsh world that asked too much of its youngest. One mistake, one door left open, and the fragile balance of air could be disrupted, putting countless lives at risk. Their lives were shaped by the unforgiving demands of mining, and their roles, though small in stature, were crucial to the workings of the underground labyrinth. Boys pushed heavy carts laden with coal through narrow, twisting tunnels, muscles straining beneath the weight. These carts, sometimes on rails but often on rough, uneven floors, required constant effort to move. The children learned to navigate the treacherous passages, balancing the loads while avoiding loose stones and sudden drops. The youngest among them were often called trappers. Their duty was deceptively simple: to open and close the ventilation doors that controlled the flow of fresh air through the tunnels. These doors were vital for the miners' survival, keeping dangerous gases at bay and ensuring the air remained breathable. Yet for the trappers, this meant hours spent alone in near-total darkness, perched on a tiny stool in cramped, silent passageways, often for shifts lasting 8 hours or more. Imagine a boy no taller than a man's waist, sitting quietly in a still tunnel, the only light the flickering glow of a nearby lamp. Beyond the trappers were other children whose duties demanded strength and endurance. Fetching tools was another common task. Miners relied on these boys to bring them pickaxes, shovels, lamps, and wedges, sometimes carrying multiple items at once through the maze-like tunnels. But life for these children was not merely about tasks. It was a harsh education in endurance, silence, and fear. Many had no choice but to work, driven by poverty and family need. Despite their hardships, the children often formed close bonds with one another, finding companionship in shared adversity. Their small hands became skilled tools themselves, able to handle the equipment needed with surprising deftness. Yet the image of children working in mines remains a poignant and painful reminder of a time when human cost was measured in lost youth and crushed dreams. As we reflect on their lives, we honor not only their labor, but the enduring spirit they carried. A spirit that, despite darkness and danger, refused to be extinguished. Deep beneath the Earth's surface, in a world cut off from sunlight and fresh air, miners faced dangers unlike any above ground. Among the most insidious threats were invisible gases that could suffocate or explode without warning. To survive, miners needed a silent alarm, something sensitive enough to detect these dangers before they struck. And so, they turned to a small, fragile bird, the canary. The use of canaries in mines began in the early 1900s, a simple yet ingenious solution to a deadly problem. These birds, delicate and light, were brought into the darkness in tiny cages. Their bright feathers and gentle songs, an odd contrast to the grim and gritty underground world. But the canary was far more than a companion. It was a lifeline. Miners quickly learned to listen to the canary's song, which became a beacon of safety amid the suffocating darkness. The bird's cheerful chirping filled the silence, a sharp and clear melody that cut through the low murmurs of men and the steady clinking of tools. Each note was a reassurance that the air remained safe, that poisonous gases had not yet crept into the tunnels. But the canary was also a sentinel of silence. When the bird suddenly fell quiet, when its song stopped mid-phrase, or it grew still in its cage, the miners knew that the air had turned deadly. The silence was no peaceful calm. It was an urgent warning, a final breath signaling invisible danger. In those moments, the underground world shifted. What had been routine and rhythmic became tense and immediate. The miners' reactions were swift and instinctual. Tools were dropped without hesitation. Voices might rise in alarm or calls to evacuate. Every second counted as men moved quickly through narrow tunnels, the oppressive air thickening with invisible menace. They knew that if the canary was silent, they had only moments to escape before the gas overwhelmed them. Carbon monoxide, known as the silent killer, was one such gas. Colorless and odorless, it was deadly in small amounts. Methane gas was another hazard, a highly flammable gas that could ignite with the smallest spark, causing devastating explosions. The canary's sensitivity to these gases made it invaluable. Its smaller lungs and faster breathing meant it succumbed to toxins before humans, providing a crucial early warning. The relationship between miners and their canaries was complex, marked by both pragmatism and care. These birds were tools for survival, but miners treated them with tenderness. The small cages were carefully handled. The birds were fed and kept warm, their health a concern for those who depended on their song. Stories are told of miners singing softly to their canaries during long shifts, their voices a rare softness in the harsh underground environment. The canary was a symbol of hope, a fragile light amid darkness. It represented the precarious balance miners lived by the thin line between safety and disaster. Their survival hinged on this tiny creature's breath and song. In some mines, special canary boxes were designed to hold the bird safely, sometimes suspended near the working face, where gas was most likely to accumulate. The design allowed fresh air to reach the bird, ensuring its song could be heard clearly while protecting it from injury. Miners watched these boxes closely, the bird's behavior a constant focus. The psychological weight carried by miners was immense. To hear a canary fall silent was to confront mortality directly. It was a reminder that every moment underground carried risk, and that nature's smallest voice could dictate their fate. This fragile bird became a companion in the fight against the mine's invisible threats. Over time, technology improved. Gas detection lamps and electronic sensors gradually replaced canaries, providing more precise and reliable warnings. Yet, the legacy of the canary endures not just as a historical tool, but as a powerful symbol of vulnerability, vigilance, and the tenuous grip miners held on life. When we imagine the mine, the dark, dangerous, echoing space, we must also remember the canary's song. Its delicate chirps pierced the gloom, offering a brief, bright note of life amid the heavy silence. And when that song stopped, the silence was deafening. The canari's story is a reminder of the human cost of mining, the risks borne not only by men, but by a tiny bird whose life was sacrificed to save many. It speaks to the constant balance miners walked between danger and safety, the trust placed in the smallest of creatures. and the hope that even in the darkest places, a voice could be heard. In the heart of the mine, far from daylight and fresh air, miners carved out brief moments to eat and drink amid the grinding demands of their work. These breaks were never long, rarely warm, and almost always silent. The underground meal was a simple necessity, a pause to sustain bodies battered by hours of labor. Yet it was a stark experience eating in the very dust and darkness that surrounded them. Bread was the foundation of their sustenance, chosen because it was portable and lasted the entire long shift underground. Occasionally, a small chunk of cheese accompanied the bread, hard and sharp, offering a rare burst of flavor in an otherwise plain diet. The miners gathered in small pockets of space, barely wide enough to sit or lean against the rough walls. There was no room for comfort here. Miners ate with grimy fingers, wiping their hands on their trousers or jackets. Sometimes a flask or bottle was passed around, but often the miners made do with little, swallowing their dry bites in the face of thirst. The cold, damp air, paradoxically, left throats raw and mouths parched. These harsh conditions made even the simplest meal a challenge. The bread and cheese were coated in fine coal dust, giving every bite a gritty texture. These moments of eating were part of their harsh education in survival, shaping them physically and emotionally from a young age. Despite this, hunger overpowered discomfort. Each mouthful was devoured quickly, fueling the body for the arduous hours still to come. The care taken to preserve and carry these simple provisions reflected their importance. To lose or spoil even a small part of a meal could mean the difference between strength and collapse. The act of breaking bread in darkness, sharing scarce food, and taking a brief rest was an assertion of life in a place shadowed by danger and death. The hunger, the fatigue, the grit, and the brief, sacred moments of rest are all part of the story one of hardship met with quiet courage and unyielding hope. The flickering lamp light, the taste of warm tea, the feel of bread in their hands, all were small anchors in an otherwise uncertain world. It was a ritual that sustained them through endless shifts, a shared experience that linked generations of miners and shaped their lives in ways both visible and unseen. These meals fueled not only their bodies, but their spirits. Each meal was a reminder of endurance and human connection. The cold air hung heavy, clinging damply to clothes and skin. Sweat from exertion quickly cooled, chilling the men as they rested. Many pulled their worn jackets tighter, rubbing hands together or stamping feet in place to stave off numbness. A piece of bread might be broken and offered to a comrade whose ration was short. Cheese, a rare treat, could be passed hand to hand, a gesture of solidarity amid hardship. Eating in such cold, dark spaces sharpened every sensation: the taste of bread, the warmth of tea, the roughness of the walls around them. The starkness of the environment made these small comforts feel vital. By the time it reached the miners, however, the tea was rarely hot, usually lukewarm, or even cold. Still, the warmth of even tepid tea was a welcome comfort, a small reprieve for parched throats coated with dust. The familiar taste soothed a little, a reminder of life above ground. Their hands, blackened with coal dust and grime, moved mechanically to unwrap parcels of food. Most often, the meal was as basic as it could be: thick slices of coarse bread, dense and heavy, sometimes crumbly from age, but filling enough to keep hunger at bay. Tea was the customary drink, carried down from the surface in metal flasks or large thermoses. Eating underground was a quiet affair. Conversation was scarce, not because the men were unfriendly, but because the environment demanded focus and calm. Talking could stir dust, distract from the dangers, or simply drain the precious energy each miner had left. Instead, the meal was taken in near silence, a soundscape limited to the rustle of fabric, the crinkle of wrapping, and the occasional scrape of a knife cutting cheese or breaking bread. The dust itself was a constant presence, drifting invisibly through the air and settling thickly on every surface. Water was scarce and precious underground. The cold seeped into every corner of the tunnels, chilling the men as they rested. Meals underground also served as quiet moments of connection. Though spoken words were few, there was a sharing of food and companionship that bound the men together. Children working alongside men ate the same meager meals, their small hands struggling with the coarse bread, their faces smudged with dust and weariness far beyond their years. Despite the simplicity, the rituals of eating underground carried deep meaning. Food was transported underground in rough cloth bags, metal tins, or wrapped carefully in cloth to protect what little was available. Even in the harshest conditions, miners found solace in these moments. The simple act of eating underground cold, dusty, hurried stood as a quiet testament to the resilience and determination of those who labored below. As we reflect on the miners' lives, these small, often overlooked moments of eating remind us of the full human experience beneath the earth. The mine was a place where danger was woven into every moment. From the instant the miners stepped below the surface until they emerged again, often exhausted and grimy, the threat of disaster lingered like a shadow, unseen but never far away. Miners carved tunnels through rock and coal seams, weakening the support structures that held the mine open. Despite efforts to shore up walls and ceilings with timber and props, the risk of collapse was ever present. A single crack, a subtle shift, or the failure of a support could unleash tons of rock and debris, trapping men beneath and ending lives in an instant. Cave-ins, gas explosions, flooding, and the unstable earth itself meant that every shift was a gamble with fate. Underground water from natural springs or broken pipes could fill tunnels quickly, cutting off escape routes and drowning equipment. In some mines, heavy rains above ground sent torrents rushing into shafts, overwhelming drainage systems. Miners working at lower levels could find themselves trapped by rising water, forced to wait for rescue in cramped, dark pockets. To work in the mines was to live on the edge of uncertainty, where the ground beneath could shift without warning, and safety was fragile and fleeting. Watching a fellow miner's back was not only practical, it was a matter of survival. The sense of brotherhood was strong, unspoken but deeply felt. Even with modern technology, the unpredictable nature of the underground world meant that danger remained a constant companion. They knew that in the event of disaster, their chances of survival improved when they worked as a team. Minor tremors sometimes rattled tools and lamps, a reminder that the ground was alive and volatile. In extreme cases, these movements triggered collapses or sudden releases of gas, turning an ordinary shift into a nightmare. The rituals of safety checks, lamp inspections, and steady communication were not just procedures, they were lifelines. Knowing the risks, they moved with care, but also with a grim determination to carry on. Miners often returned covered in dirt and sweat, faces etched with exhaustion and worry. Their silence spoke volumes, each man carrying the invisible scars of daily peril. Cave-ins were among the most feared hazards. The earth above, heavy and unforgiving, pressed down relentlessly. The uncertainty was relentless. Every day, they faced the possibility that the ground beneath them might give way, or that an invisible cloud of gas might ignite. It was a silent tension, a weight that settled deep in the chest and never fully lifted. The sound of a cave-in was sudden and terrifying. A dull rumble or a sharp cracking noise would echo through the tunnels, growing louder as chunks of stone fell. Dust would billow, clouding the air, and a heavy silence would follow, a silence filled with fear and the struggle for breath. Those caught unprepared had little chance. Escape depended on quick reflexes and the support of fellow miners. Gas explosions were another deadly threat, born from the volatile methane that seeped from coal seams. Methane gas, invisible and odorless, accumulated silently in pockets. If ignited by a stray spark, whether from a lamp, tool, or friction, it could explode with devastating force. The blast would roar through the tunnels, shattering timber supports, sending debris flying, and often causing fires that raged through the mine's labyrinthine corridors. Miners learned to read the signs, the subtle changes in the air, the flickering of lamp flames, the warning silence of canaries kept in cages nearby. Yet, despite precautions, explosions still occurred with tragic regularity. The aftermath was grim. Shattered walls, collapsed tunnels, and lost lives. Rescue crews would race in, lamps flickering nervously, hoping to find survivors amid the rubble. Flooding was another danger, though less sudden. It could be equally devastating. The earth itself was unpredictable. Vibrations from mining activities or natural seismic shifts could unsettle the tunnels. Living with this constant threat took a heavy toll on miners' minds. Miners developed coping mechanisms. They relied on routines, training, and each other's vigilance. Despite the dangers, miners formed bonds forged in shared risk. Trust became essential. Families and communities lived with the constant anxiety of loss. The fear of accidents haunted homes above ground. Regulations and safety improvements gradually reduced some risks, but the mine never lost its dangerous edge. The end of a miner's long, arduous shift was marked by a moment both eagerly anticipated and quietly solemn, a signal to return to the surface. After hours spent in oppressive darkness, surrounded by the endless echo of picks striking stone and the ever-present weight of coal dust, the call to ascend was like a distant promise finally coming within reach. The faint clanging of the bell, the voice of the cage operator, and the familiar mechanical sounds stirring in the shaft offered a rare sense of relief, a chance to leave behind the underground world, if only for a time. As the day's work wound down, the tunnels seemed to change. The sharp rhythm of labor softened. The heavy breathing of the men slowed. Tools were laid aside, lamps extinguished or carefully capped. Miners moved toward the shaft with slow, deliberate steps, bodies aching, muscles stiff from hours bent over the coalface. Every movement was weighted, not just by exhaustion, but by the knowledge that leaving the depths was never guaranteed. Yet this moment was a quiet celebration, a collective, unspoken relief to be alive and whole once more. The journey to the cage lift was never a quick one. Winding through narrow, twisting tunnels lined with timber supports and slick stone walls, the men shuffled single file. Faces blackened with coal dust or streaked with sweat and grime. Eyes, often red-rimmed and heavy, scanned the dim path ahead or fixed on the weak flicker of remaining lamplight. Every footfall was cautious fatigue, could cause missteps, and the tunnels were unforgiving. Clutching worn tools, empty lunch pails, or spare lamps, the miners carried the physical and mental residue of the day. The dust embedded in their hair and clothes seemed to weigh down their very souls. Yet despite the hardship, there was a quiet dignity in their movements, a steady, resilient determination to see another day through. The cage itself stood waiting, a simple yet vital lifeline. Made of iron bars and heavy wood planks, it was suspended by thick steel cables running up the vertical shaft. A cage operator, stationed high above, called out in practiced tones, his voice carrying through the shaft's hollow depths as he prepared the mechanism for the ascent. Men climbed in carefully, squeezing into the cramped space. The cage was narrow and cold, often shaking slightly with each person's movement. The miners huddled close, a tight-knit cluster of bodies coated in dirt and sweat, sharing the limited warmth of their collective presence. Some sat or crouched if there was space. Others stood, clutching the cage's bars or each other's shoulders for balance. Conversations were few and muted. Many miners closed their eyes, seeking brief escape and rest. Others stared upward, their thoughts already drifting toward the world above, the cool breeze, the taste of clean air, the familiar sights and sounds of home. Inside the cage, the smell of coal dust mixed with the scent of sweat and damp clothes, a reminder of the underground life they carried with them like a second skin. As the cage began its slow, mechanical climb, the miners felt the subtle pressure of changes in their ears. The walls of the shaft loomed close, a narrow tunnel of stone and timber, dark and enclosing. Gradually, the faint glow of daylight filtered down, growing stronger with every meter gain. The ascent was a passage from one world to another, from the claustrophobic depths to the vast openness above. Minutes stretched as the cage rattled upward. The silence was heavy, but not oppressive. It was the quiet of men accustomed to hardship, tempered by hope. Many of the miners carried a silent prayer or whispered thanks for the journey's progress, each breath a reminder of the preciousness of life. Finally, the cage reached the surface. The heavy iron doors slid open with a grinding noise, revealing the bright, unfiltered world beyond. The sudden flood of sunlight was blinding after the endless darkness. Miners shielded their eyes, blinking repeatedly as their vision adjusted. Faces coated in soot slowly lifted toward the sky, revealing expressions of exhaustion mixed with relief. The air above ground was sharp and cool, filled with scents of earth, vegetation, and human activity, so different from the stale, dust-filled atmosphere below. The sounds of birdsong, distant voices, and the rustling of leaves filled the ears. For many, this sensory onslaught was overwhelming but welcome, a balm for senses numbed by underground life. Outside the mine shaft, families and friends often waited anxiously, their faces etched with worry and hope. Reunions were sometimes quiet and restrained, a hand grasped here, a quick embrace there, but no less heartfelt. The men's return was a moment of renewal, an end to the day's perils, and the beginning of rest. The miners made their way to wash stations, where they removed layers of grime and soot. Streams of cold water were splashed over faces and hands, coaxing away the black residue that clung stubbornly. Some changed clothes if possible, donning fresh garments, or simply wringing out their worn ones. The transformation was small, but significant, a shedding of one world in preparation for another. Yet even as they emerged into the light, the shadow of the mine remained with them. The dangers faced below were never far from memory. Bodies ached, lungs burned from coal dust, and minds were heavy with the day's strains. But there was pride, too, a quiet strength born of enduring hardship and returning again. Many miners carried the physical and emotional scars of their work. Some moved with stiffness or limped from injuries sustained underground. Others bore the marks of long exposure, the chronic cough, the pallor of coal workers' pneumoconiosis. But their spirits, though weathered, remained unbroken. The return to the surface was both an ending and a beginning. It ended a day of toil and risk, but marked the start of recovery and preparation. Soon, the cycle would repeat, descending once more into the depths to extract coal that powered a growing world. But for now, there was rest, fresh air, and the embrace of life above. The ascent in the cage was more than a physical journey. It was a passage between two worlds. Below, the darkness and danger tested every fiber of the miner's being. Above, light and life offered renewal and hope. Each climb back to the surface was a victory against the odds, a reclaiming of breath and sight. As they stepped from the cage and into daylight, miners often paused, breathing deeply, blinking against the brightness, savoring the moment. It was a daily miracle, a reminder that after the long hours in the earth's shadow, they still stood strong. Their faces, blackened and worn, told stories of endurance and sacrifice. Their eyes, tired yet watchful, reflected a resilience forged in darkness. Hearts, heavy with memories of the underground, beat steadily with gratitude for another day survived. The cycle of descent and return continued day after day, shift after shift. It was a rhythm as old as mining itself, a testament to human courage and determination. The cage's slow climb was more than metal and cables. It was the thread that connected hardship to hope, shadow to light. After a long, grueling day beneath the earth, the ritual of washing off the darkness became a sacred moment for miners. Hours spent in the suffocating depths left their bodies, coated in thick layers of soot and grime, a stubborn blackness that clung to skin, hair, and clothes alike. The baths themselves were simple rows of communal washing stations with troughs and basins, lined with chipped tiles and cracked mirrors. It was far from pristine, yet it held a cleansing power, both physical and symbolic. As the men stepped in, the water seemed to absorb the day's grime, carrying it away down the drains. This was a place of transition, where miners shed not just dirt, but the weight of their labor. Emerging from the mine was only the first step. Cleansing away the physical and mental residue of the day was another essential passage, a renewal that marked the boundary between the harsh world underground and the fragile life above. The act of washing soot from their bodies became a ritual of purification, a way to shed the fear, fatigue, and weight of the underground world. The atmosphere was intimate and raw, men, stripped of pretenses, united in vulnerability. It was a rare moment when the harshness of their work gave way to quiet humanity. As men dried off and dressed, they reclaimed a part of themselves lost in the tunnels. The contrast between the blackened miner and the clean man was stark, a visual testament to the boundary between labor and life. Water streaming down faces and limbs carried away more than dirt. It lifted away the tension and dread, if only for a moment. Others were quicker, eager to return to families or homes waiting beyond the colliery walls. But all shared the common understanding that washing off the dark was an essential rite. Without it, the grime of the mine would become a permanent shroud. At the colliery baths, the air was thick with steam, and the sharp scent of wet coal dust mingled with soap. The water itself was darkened, tinted by years of soot and coal dust washed from countless bodies. The process was methodical. Miners undressed, revealing bodies marked by hard work, calloused hands, bruises, scars, and muscles hardened by years of toil. They gathered in small groups, sharing muted conversation or silent companionship. As clothes were put back on, conversations would slowly rise, talk of the day's work, family news, hopes, and fears. The shared experience of cleansing created bonds, a sense of community among those who understood the weight of the miner's life. The baths were a social space as much as a place of hygiene, a sanctuary where the miners could relax, reflect, and reconnect. The water's darkness spoke of relentless labor and sacrifice. In the water's embrace, they could momentarily escape the grime that defined their work and remember themselves as men beyond the coal. It was a fragile, fleeting renewal, a chance to face the world again, cleansed and whole. The aches and scars revealed beneath the suds told silent stories of accidents and endurance. The routine of washing, repeated day after day, was a humble testimony to a life lived on the edge of danger. Dipping hands and faces into the water, the men began the slow, deliberate work of scrubbing away the blackness. The coarse scrubbing brushes and rough cloths scraped against skin, peeling away layers of grime. It was a visual reminder of the miners' shared struggle, a collective mark of sacrifice and endurance. Yet beneath the soot lay the resilience of flesh and bone, of men who faced danger daily and emerged to wash it away. Each stroke revealed flashes of pale skin beneath, a stark contrast to the darkness they carried. The act was exhausting and relieving, painful in its rawness, yet comforting in its promise of renewal. The water grew ever murkier, thick with the sediment of countless shifts. For many miners, the baths were more than a physical cleanse, they were an emotional release. The silence in the baths was profound. Here, words were few, replaced by the sound of water splashing, brushes scrubbing, and the occasional sigh of relief. Some miners lingered longer, savoring the warmth and the sensation of cleanliness. The transition from the baths to dry clothes in fresh air marked a rebirth. The colliery baths were also a place of stories. Yet the baths held their own reminders of hardship. Through this ritual, miners found not only cleanliness, but dignity. Even as miners lay down to rest after their long shifts beneath the earth, the mine never truly left them. It lingered in their minds like a shadow, woven into the fabric of their dreams and waking thoughts. The rhythms of coal and silence, of darkness and danger, became a constant presence etched deeply into their bodies and souls. Rest was often uneasy, interrupted by memories and worries, a mental tether to the underground world they could never fully escape. The toll mining exacted was immense. The body bore the brunt in visible ways. Aches, bruises, and scars marked every man. Days spent crouched in narrow tunnels, swinging heavy tools, and inhaling clouds of dust left muscles strained and lungs battered. The stress and trauma of mining life could manifest in anxiety, depression, or a deep weariness that seeped into every aspect of daily living. Yet amid this darkness, miners found strength in camaraderie, faith, and the hope that their efforts would provide for their families. Their resilience was a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure. Bodies rested, but minds wrestled with the day's events and the uncertainty of tomorrow. Dreams became a space where the past and future converged, memories of the mind's darkness, mingling with hopes for safety and a better life. The ever-present risk of accidents, explosions, or collapses was a quiet terror that never fully faded. They remind us of lives lived on the edge of darkness and light, of courage found in the depths, and of dreams that reach beyond the mind's shadow. Through every moment, from the rattling descent into the mines, the flickering lamp, flames, the eerie sounds that echoed in the tunnels. If you found this journey through the mines moving and insightful, please like this video and subscribe for more stories that bring history's hidden worlds to light. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. To the sharp bite of cold water in the colliery baths, their lives were defined by endurance and courage. We've explored the tools they wielded, the bonds they forged, and the ever-present threats that shadowed every shift. We've walked with children carrying lamps and pushing carts, listened for the silent warnings of canaries, and felt the cold, gritty meals taken in the depths. And finally, we've seen them return battered, weary, yet unbroken, washed free of coal dust, and carrying the weight of generations who lived by the rhythm of coal and silence. In remembering these miners, we honor their struggles and the enduring spirit that carried them through. Many would follow in the footsteps of those before them, stepping into the mine with a mix of duty, necessity, and resignation. The cycle continued. A rhythm of coal and silence passed from generation to generation. Even in sleep, miners were haunted by the sounds of the earth rumbling rock, the distant crash of falling stone, and the eerie silence before disaster. Annual commemorations for those lost underground, songs and stories that honored the fallen, and daily acts of solidarity all spoke to a shared understanding of risk and sacrifice. The mine shaped not just work, but identity and belonging. They lay awake, staring into the dark, listening for sounds that might never come, caught between exhaustion and alertness. The sacrifices made by miners sustained communities and fueled industries. Their labor powered cities and nations, bringing light and warmth to millions. The legacy of their endurance lives on, a reminder of the human cost behind every lump of coal. This was the quiet cost of a life spent underground. Others relived moments underground, reliving the tension and danger as though caught once again beneath the shifting earth. For many, the mine was both a prison and a protector, a source of both livelihood and sacrifice. These echoes could invade dreams, turning rest into restless vigilance. The constant exposure to coal dust caused a slow, relentless decline for many, leading to chronic illnesses that shadowed their later years. Yet the physical pain was only one part of the story. The mind carried burdens just as heavy. Generations of mining families lived and died by this rhythm of toil and uncertainty. Fathers passed down stories of danger and survival to sons, who learned from an early age that the mine was both a source of livelihood and a place of loss. The identity of communities was intertwined with coal, shaping culture, language, and tradition. Birth and death, joy and grief, all unfolded against the backdrop of the mine's unyielding presence. Sleep was often a fragile reprieve. Some miners found solace in dreams of home, the warmth of a fire, the laughter of children, the promise of peace. The psychological impact was profound. Children growing up in mining towns absorbed this legacy. From a young age, they witnessed the toll on parents and neighbors. The community rituals that grew around mining life reflected this complex relationship. As night deepened, the world outside might be quiet and still, but inside miners' homes, the weight of the day's labor lingered. For some, rest was elusive. The ache of a bruised body, the wheeze of damaged lungs, or the silent fear of collapse kept sleep at bay. Yet even in this hardship, there was meaning. The rhythms of coal and silence continue in memory and story. The world beneath the earth is one of darkness, danger, and relentless toil, a place where men and boys faced unimaginable challenges to carve out a living. Their story is a testament to the human spirit, to resilience in the face of adversity, and to the sacrifices made beneath the surface that powered the world above.